So we got a little bit of news today, nothing too major to talk about. So instead, we're going to jump into a Transformer Slag podcast Patreon listener question. Then we'll jump into the news later this week. We've been a little behind on the Patreon listener questions because we had a double dose of TFCon and all the busyness that it took up in the podcast world for me. And then, of course, San Diego Comic-Con that came right afterwards, and we knew how busy that was going to be. So I apologize for falling behind on some of the Patreon listener questions, but we're going to cover one today, and it's a really good one. And again, if you want to be part of the Transformer Slag Patreon and help support the podcast, let us know. We're doing a half-decent job here in the Transformer world, keeping you educated, informed, and up-to-date on what's going on in the Transformer world, and keeping it factual and avoiding all the drama and everything that exists on some of the forums and stuff like that. Again, patreon.com/protoman. Or check the pinned comment or the description below if you want to find that link. What does it get you if you join the Patreon? It gets you your name in the end credit scroll. At the end of every segment moving forward, gets you access to the exclusive Transformer Slag podcast Discord, where we share lore, share the news, share deals, share sales, pretty much keeping a nice tight-knit community so we could save money in our hobby and move forward in a proper way and avoiding all the drama. Depending also on what tier you're part of, you also might get a little something in the mail, maybe a little gift, a little something that I might throw your way, depending on what tier you're part of, or access to Ask the Patreon listener question. And we have a Patreon listener question today from JC Red Lion. And JC's questions actually is money related in a lot of ways, which is always a very important topic I find to discuss in this hobby, because as someone who's a buyer and seller of collections and someone who does the charity auction for TFCon every year, I see where the money flows and where it goes. And JC Red Lion here wants to know, hello, Protoman. It's been very entertaining listening to your podcast. I have a question I want to ask you, and that is about buying habits. How do you collect responsibly and not just ride the hype train? I've recently picked up a Masterpiece Ultra Magnus at a good deal to add to my 86 movie collection display. I wasn't as excited as getting the recent Legacy line. Thank you for all the great stuff you do, and have fun at TFCon, which right away says how late this post is. But again, I apologize for that, JC Red Lion. But thank you again for the question and all the kind words. It starts with experience. I'll have to say it. There is some stuff that could be taught, and there is some stuff that I can say to you that will help you in your journey of buying responsibly. But it's also something that you have to skin your knee and make those mistakes too, because when it comes to buying responsibly in this hobby, it really is a person-to-person thing, because depending on what your goals are with this hobby, it could get really out of hand, or it could be very easy not to, spend too crazy. If you're someone that just collects specific characters, I only collect cliff jumpers and beachcombers, then, if your budget is there, then you could buy responsibly. And that's another thing too. And I've said this to even previous patrons that have contacted me that said, hey man, I can't afford the podcast Patreon anymore. And I tell them, hey, it's no problem. Take care of your family, take care of your budgets before you have to put it into recreational stuff and entertainment. And that's a big part of being responsible too, is you got to really look at what your income is and your life situation before you start spending crazy money. Because I know way too many guys in this fandom that spend way beyond their means and rack up credit card bills. And next thing you know, something happens to their car and they need to do a car payment. And all of a sudden, here's all this product that they're putting up for sale. And I will say this. If it's something that you're buying that you could easily turn around and want to sell it if, all of a sudden you need to change the suspension on your Honda, it probably wasn't something that was too important to you to begin with. I always say really, really buy the things that matter to you, because and this comes from my own personal experience, when I was at a point where I was a crazy completist, and that was literally between 2001, when I got my first legitimate job, to, I want to say, about 2009, 2010, when the light bulb finally went off after almost, 9 to 10 years, where you just can't keep up and you start buying a bunch of things that really you don't have an emotional attachment to. So you kind of end up in this situation where you start buying things that you buy them either out of habit, either because it's new, and the new car feeling or the new car smell of toys is a real thing. Sometimes when a product is new, people buy it just because it's new. I've talked with some Hasbro designers about the old trick of, you have a mold and you go, well, that mold would be perfectly good to make a huffer out of it. And they don't paint it like huffer because they know it's a brand new mold. And if you paint it as something else and you put it out there, they'll buy it because it's a brand new mold. And then when you do the huffer repaint, they'll buy it again because, oh, now it's huffer. Now it's the colors it was meant to be. I mean, we already saw that with Studio Series 86 Cup and the Earthrise Cliff Jumper, and how those two had brand new repaints afterwards that were slightly better, and how so many people, and I saw it through TFCon's charity auction just recently last month, how so many people were donating that kind of stuff because, 2 sales were made. And it's a reality. You got to pace yourself. You got to think responsibly. And a lot of it just has to do with experience and seeing what has happened in the past with this hobby and to get around it. The buying responsibly part falls into your own self-control. It falls into understanding the dip. And what I mean by the dip is that 95% of Transformer toys go below MSRP at some point in their lifespan. That extra 5%, yeah, those are the outliers. Those are the weird stuff. Those are the stuff that, are the hot items or stuff that gets scalped. But the other 95%, there's some kind of sale. There's some kind of deal. There's some kind, and to an extreme extent, there's some kind of guy who bought it, opened it, and selling it loose for 50% of the value. I mean, look, there was just recently that crazy Hasbro Pulse sale that made so many people regret buying, the X-Men crossover 100%, buying the Jurassic Park crossover 100%, the Seeker Jets, the recent Seeker Jet masterpieces. You bought 2, you got 1 free. You got a free masterpiece. Good Lord, So you got to really be careful with that. Even the Skids and Reboost, the recent Skids masterpiece was 40% off. So you really got to dance with that stuff and understand the ebbs and the flows and the dip that exists in this hobby. So you could buy everything full price and live in fear that, if I don't buy it full price, it might go up in value. And yeah, it does eventually go up in value. It takes a little bit of time for some. It takes a lot of time for others. But there is a dip. And at some point, it does go down. And in some points, it goes really down. At some points, you can't even sell it anymore, with some items. But, I'm reminded of stuff like a, Universe Ironhide Deluxe class, where so many people were buying that. And it was like, oh, this is going to be my Classics Ironhide in my display. And now no one wants that thing anymore. Can't give it away, let alone its MSRP of at the time, $14.99. So it gets really tough. It gets really, really tough trying to figure that stuff out unless you've really walked that experience and have seen the mistakes and experienced those mistakes. But you got to educate yourself. And I mean, that's kind of what this podcast is for, is to try to educate yourself. I can't stress this enough. One thing that really bothered me was for weeks on end, before we even saw what it looked like, for weeks on end, I was talking about the Velocitron Cosmos and Clampdown and having those case assortment numbers because of the leaks and going, guys, these are going to be 1 per case. They're going to be crazy. And for weeks and weeks and weeks warning people about that. And then their frustration afterwards. Why was it 1 per case? We didn't know that. I've been saying it for weeks. I should make a collage of every time I talked about the Velocitron line and reminding people of it. And then them going, well, why did they make Cosmos 1 per case? Again, educate yourself. He was going to be a straight up repaint retool, and then they managed to fit the budget that they could actually make him out of 4 molds of brand new tooling. But the compromise was to make it 1 per case. And if you make it one per case, you got to make another guy one per case. And Clampdown was probably the least exciting of the bunch from the perspective of the Hasbro designers. And that was that. But the point is that what I'm trying to get at is I was talking about that for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then people, when the day came, it's like they forgot that this was ever discussed. You got to educate yourself and you got to remember what happens. And then that way you could get in on that and then understand that and not make those mistakes again. And like I said, 95% of Transformer products go on sale. The other 5%, which will probably be something like Cosmos, will hold its value or go up. But at the same time, who knows? Opportunities might present themselves. Don't fall for the scalpers and pay those prices, because part of the reason why scalping is so successful and why it happens so much is because there's people that feed it. If you get a guy who buys 10 Cosmoses from your local Walmart and then no one pays the scalped value that he's asking, he's going to have to sit on it. That thing's going to have to pay rent in his house, taking up space in his living room while his girlfriend yells at him to sell that stuff. And then what happens is it creates an emotional experience with him where he won't do it again. But if he buys those things, those 10, and then he turns around and asks $60 a piece, and everyone turns around and pays it, guess what? He's going to do it again. And he's going to do it again, and he's going to do it again. You got to burn these guys. You got to make them choke on it. And there's just so many things going on that it's sometimes hard to keep track of it. Like you said, riding the hype train and getting excited. Look, new Transformer product is always exciting. New TV series, new figures, new characters, new designs, new molds. It's all very exciting. But at the same time, you also got to figure out where your enjoyment lies, because I can't buy it all. Don't be surprised. I have a humongous collection, but I've said this tons of times. I have 10,000 Transformers. I'm missing 10,000 Transformers because you can't own it all. So there's no point in trying to chase it and try to get it all. Just get something that you feel you would enjoy. And going to your statement there where you got the Masterpiece Ultra Magnus and you felt that you weren't excited as to get it as, let's say, something from the Legacy line, I also feel that sometimes happens because people have a fear of messing and enjoying with expensive product. Like when you, especially with the recent reputations that certain masterpieces are fragile and have breaking areas and stuff like that. So people are kind of scared to transform it back and forth or have it as a desk former, as I like to call it, where you could just kind of mess with it when you're bored. Where a legacy product, which is a mass retail product, it's a little more rigorous. It could kind of deal with that kind of heavier ham-fisted play, So I think that's also kind of a thing. You have to, when you're a masterpiece collector, I think you have to kind of accept the fact that you're probably going to transform it once or twice, and then it's going to sit on display for a very long period of time. Just because of its intricacy, its engineering, its length of transformation. Sometimes it'll take you, between 20 and 30 minutes to transform some stuff, just because of how complicated some of them are. So you have to really ask, what's the enjoyment you're getting out of a masterpiece? Is it to have a proper figural representation of a character that is accurate to how it looked on the screen, but the sacrifice of it is the enjoyment of doing the simplistic transformation over and over? Or, the worry that you might break something, or there's too many accessories, so you don't get to enjoy all those extra face sculpts and hand sculpts, or whatever it be. It's a deeper question, this one, because it falls into your own situation, your own money situation, your own enjoyment situation. When I say collect responsibly, the first thing I always say is be patient. Wait. There's way too many times people just jump into stuff. They really do. They just jump into these situations and they buy everything. The best ever was, I remember when Titans Returns came out, and for some reason we had the whole first wave for TFCon weekend, and we auctioned them at the charity auction, the whole first wave, and they went for crazy numbers, those deluxe classes. Like the Chrome Dome and the Highbrow and everything. And they went for crazy numbers. I think they were like $40 a piece they ended up selling for. And then the following TFCon, guess what was a majority of the stuff that was donated? And when you donate something, yeah, you're doing it for a good cause, but it's also because it doesn't mean something to you anymore. It was all those Titans Return stuff. Just as quickly, it just boomeranged back. So it showed in a lot of ways just how that is. And I mean, I see that with third-party collectors. So many people buying third-party stuff that it serves a purpose in the moment, and then it just as easily, quickly becomes something that doesn't matter anymore. How many third-party Megatrons I've seen from Hexatron and this one and that one that ended up just becoming pointless in their mind afterwards, and it just didn't fit into their collection, and they spent like third-party numbers for something that was a deluxe or a Voyager class. So, you're talking sometimes between $70 and $80 or something that might be Voyager scale or deluxe. So and I seen that with Bumblebee, in that pursuit to get the perfect Volkswagen Beetle before we finally got it through Netflix. And it's a shame. It's a long discussion that requires a lot more deeper probing on an individual level and understanding yourself. But it's something that I think about a lot, even for myself, when it comes to this hobby, because it is an expensive hobby. It is a hobby that, luckily, it's an expensive hobby that you could kind of turn around and get some of the money back. There's a lot of hobbies that people have that they could spend crazy money and they can't turn around and get that money back in some shape. We're lucky that we can in some shape or form. Sometimes I see it that it's half a hobby, but also half a short-term diminishing investment. It's like collecting cars in a lot of ways. Yeah, in a lot of ways. In that, like, yeah, you might not get back your full MSRP, but you could get some of it back if you price it right. So at least it's one of those hobbies that we're lucky to have that. But you got to be smart about it. You got to be smart, because otherwise you're going to be one of those guys that spent way too much, and then when the real expenses in life come, mortgage, rent, car payments, they got married, they need to pay for a kid's room, whatever it is. And I've seen it tons of times before. You got to make sure you're in a situation where you're able to buy this stuff, and if that kind of stuff comes up, your hobby doesn't have to be affected by it. And if your hobby isn't being affected by it, you're being responsible. And that's the most important thing, especially when it comes to the toy hobby. So I hope that kind of answers it a little bit. I know it was really, heavy-handed in a lot of this, and we kind of went off the rails in some areas, but it's just, you got to be smart with this hobby. You really do. This podcast exists for educating, because every time my eye catches a thread on Facebook from some kind of Facebook group or some kind of comment or something, I see just how much the fandom still needs to learn on how this hobby works. And maybe it's just people that are new to it and they're emotional, and I could get that. In the moment they say silly things that they would probably regret looking back a month, 2 months, 3 months later. But they really got to understand how things are going on and how to avoid that drama, how to avoid those problems, and how to avoid those negative feels. And hopefully it'll all work out for the best for all of us. So thank you again for the question, JC Red Lion. Hope that helped a little bit. And if you want to be like JC Red Lion, ask a Patreon listener question, or you just want to be part of the Transformer Slag podcast Patreon and support us and let us know we're doing a good job, again, patreon.com/Protoman, or check the pinned comment or the description below. And again, like I always say, enjoy your hobby, enjoy yourself. It's a beautiful world out there. Take care of each other and rock out with the robots in disguise.